Welcome back, YouTubers, to my channel of an everyday life of an Aspie. My name is AspieAnswersAll. For the new person that has landed on my channel, I welcome you all with open arms right now, and hopefully that once we journey this journey together with me creating a health awareness and just sharing everyday stuff, that hopefully we can relate one way or another. And also, I am hoping to be an advocate or mentor or what have you for people that haven't got a voice for certain everyday topics that they feel that they want me to address or what have you, or just my opinions on some things. And that's all good, because it's all about, you know, seeing each other's differences and respecting it. So without further ado, guys, I've been talking about the next series, which is the sensory processing disorders, and in a few pieces I was just entailing what it is versus what the causes are versus basically the definition of it, how it affects people with sensory processing disorders, bearing in mind that, as I said, that it's not always the classic symptoms of Asperger's syndrome versus the autistic community that gets it. It's broader and wider to other people as well. You know, you don't always have to be on an autistic pretty much to actually, you know, get these sort of disorders. But in all further ado, now I'm talking about the categories of the sensory processing disorders, and they come into 4 stages. And basically what I'm going to do here, basically break it down to those 4 stages and explain in each of those 4 stages what it entails and what happens and how it may affect people maybe. So in all for the do, guys, thanks for watching. Here goes. So as you know, as I said, there's 4 types of sensory processing disorders in the categories of it, and obviously that's, you know, like many disorders, sometimes they will branch out to different categories to best fit to describe each and everyday function, how our body works and why it may not work, so to speak. So the 4 types I'm going to talk about are the sensory defensiveness disorder is number 1. Number 2 is your sensory integrative disorder. Number 3 is basically your sensory modulation disorder. And number 4, your sensory restoration. So as you know, basically, for the first one of the sensory defensiveness, what it is a negative reaction to one or more types of these 5 classic senses that we have, or sensations from those classic, you know, senses of our smell, touch, taste, feel, hearing and whatnot. And basically with these everyday 5 senses, basically this often requires for us to control the daily routine that we go out in our very basics of our merry way. So the characteristics that's involved basically in the sensory defensiveness is pretty much number 1 is aversive or defensive reactions to non-noxious kind of stimuli across one or more sensory modalities. What I mean here is obviously, you know, people that has this may have one basically senses that can be affected by the sensory processing disorder that can cause some disturbance in the brain versus just the disturbances in the chemicals of our nervous system. Basically, for example, like, you know, people with hearing problems will have problems with inside that middle earlobe there, where the sound usually travels and actually, you know, goes across. Number 2 is characterized by over responding to one or more sensory systems. So basically what I mean here is our nervous system, basically it breaks down into neurons, and like the classic example to get a clearer understanding is like the touch receptors in our fingertips. Pretty much if we just put it onto a hot plate on the stove top or something, and we get that burning sensation and that we feel it obviously, but then it's not as of yet until we feel that pressure point to a degree that it will send messages to our brain to remove our hands before we do more damaging grip. And last but not least on this one is for sensory defensiveness has an overriding negative emotional response. So therefore what I'm meaning is whatever they go through and they're basically stimuli, be it the touch, taste, feel, and that sometimes it may involve a meltdown or anything like that. So for the sensory regulation disorder, however, it has 3 types of regulation disorders as shared before, and they were your hypersensitive, this is your hyposensitive is 1 and 2, and your last and not least is your stimulation seeking, which is the seeking impulsiveness of everything. So what happens here for the characteristics, as we know, basically to make it short and brief, is number 1, over/under responding, seeking sensory stimulation, and number 2 is characterized by fearful, anxious responses from that, sensory output of wherever it may be to give that fight, flight, fright response. Number 4 is negative or stubborn behaviors in the person, basically, Number 3 is their self-absorbed behavior. So this is the classic one for most people on the autistic. This is, people with Asperger's syndrome, and that characteristics of those, it can happen. Number 3 is your sensory regulation disorder, which I've actually marked up there, which actually is that. What I mean here is obviously for the one for that sensory modulation, just to clarify, sorry, I'm trying to read my writing as I'm trying to revise it all and actually, remember what I'm trying to say here. So forgive me here. Sensory modulation, if you want to know what it is all about, it's also classically known as the sensory integration dysfunction, which is a condition that exists when sensory signals don't act or organize in appropriate responses, however. This refers to the way how the nervous system will receive the messages from the senses of our 5 classic senses, be it whatever it is, and then in turn will turn them into appropriate motor and behavioral responses that needs to carry out that output. Right, the sensory regulation disorder was the 3 types of regulation disorders that I actually, did about just now, that I marked up based on those 2. So humbly apologize. So review that again. Sensory regulation disorder has 3 types of regulation disorder as shared before. As I said, number 1, hypersensitive, number 2, hypersensitive, number 3, sensory stimulation seeking behaviors. And this, for the characteristics, basically, this breaking it down to gain this understanding is, for the characteristics, it's a process by which the central nervous system attends to the stimuli. Okay, then from the next step over for the characteristics, it's categorized by over, under, or inconsistent responses to the stimuli, and then the person, last but not least, may appear lethargic. Okay, last but not least is your sensory integrative disorder. Okay, what this entails for the characteristics, or what it does, is person that suffers from this basically will have difficulty responding as a result of a cortical organisation. So the cortical organisation, what I mean, is a part of the brain where it gathers the information of the cortex, and that basically what happens here is that, again, mixed messages from the brain from other senses, and then from there it might appear that we should be, happy, sad, and all that based on our feelings and emotions, but it doesn't always work that way. So now the part of the characteristics, it is characterized by the fight, flight, or fright responses. And last but not least, what happens here for the characteristics, if it's impaired agility, coordination, visual motor skills, and movement sequences, what happens in this sensory integrative disorder. So that ends basically the categories of the sensory processing disorders. Give me the like for thumbs up, showing that you're engaging. Humbly apologise for the markup on the 2 that I sort of clarify. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, basically. Also feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so for daily, weekly vlogs. Also feel free to basically share the videos around as educational tool or whatever if you feel the need or have to of certain topics that I address that as I said, that is close to my heart. So without further ado, guys, love what you do it, love, forgive one another, love each other. Until next time, thanks for your support. I'll see you all again soon.